All right, very good. Hi, everybody. It's so good to have you here. And I want to thank Mary Beth for inviting me to do this. Um, I'm in a program, as many of you read in the letter that I sent, the bio that I sent out, called MHTP. And what that is Music for Healing and Transition Program. And so I will be called a music practitioner once I get certified. And I want to clarify transition means somebody who is actively dying. Okay. The program got started when Lori Riley, who's a very well known harpist, um, her father ended up with pneumonia to the point where he needed to be in ICU, and he couldn't communicate with her. Um, so I guess he was in maybe an induced coma while they were trying to work on healing the pneumonia. And she brought her harp and asked the staff and the doctors if she could just play music. She played for 5 minutes. And when she stopped playing, his oxygen levels rose and the oxygen meter that they measure the oxygen levels started to go off. She started playing again and his oxygen levels leveled out again. And so she continued to play music. There was, over the time, there was improvement with her father, and the doctors and nurses said, you need to keep playing because this is working. And so 2 weeks after he was admitted to the hospital, he got to go home. And that got her really thinking about how music works in the healing process. And she started to work on a master's degree. Well, she met a woman by the name of Martha Lewis. She was being asked to give workshops on music as a healing process. And in one of those workshops, she met Martha Lewis, who was getting her Master's of Arts in Expressive Arts Therapy. And she was writing a book on statistical research study on the effects of healing music. And so in the ICU unit. So the two of them got together and two other musicians joined them. And they started the program in March of 1994. And then it became a nonprofit in 1995 and was a corporation in 1996. So that lets you know how fairly new this vocation is. At the same time that her father was in the hospital, cardiologists were doing research on what they call awareness. And what are I'm just going to say it, the spiritual implications of being aware of our body and all of the energy that surrounds us has on the effects of keeping a healthy heart. And so a lot of hospitals, including Beaumont Hospital in Royal Oak, has what they call this heart math science behind them. So I think what I want to do is just kind of talk a little bit about the science of this, but not in scientific terms, in terms of a metaphor. There is a video where somebody sets up metronomes one at a time, and he gets these metronomes to kind of clicking, and they're all going off at different times. But at some point, they begin to click all in the same direction at the same time. And that's called entrainment. I think a lot of you, if you remember your physics, you remember how atoms are vibrating objects, right? And so if every single atom, even the atom in the table in front of you, the chair that you're sitting on is vibrating, then everything is vibrating because it all begins to build up. So there's this energy around us that is a scientific study. If you throw a rock into a pond and you see the ripples of the waves, right? you're seeing one effect, a visible sign of that. But what we don't think about is what are the waves that are happening underneath the water because of the motion of those waves on top, or even the air above those little ripples. So that's what all of this healing music is kind of around energy and the vibrations that we carry with us, and how our own energy, when it comes in contact with somebody else's energy, something happens. I hope I'm making some sense so far.
What is the word that was with the metronomes? Entrainment?
Entrainment. 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 And I'll talk a little bit more about that when I talk about some of the types of medical issues that we address with music. A lot of our Western medical studies have now at least opened up towards a lot of what happens in the East. A lot of you have heard of Qi. You know, you've seen people doing the small, I forget what they call it.
Tai Chi.
Tai Chi. You all know about acupuncture, chiropractors, and a whole host of other, which isn't Eastern, but a whole host of other healing properties that have entered into holistic medical field. But music and the way it helps people isn't so much anecdotal anymore. There has been research, scientific research put into nursing and medical journals about how music makes a difference in the healing process. Now, I want to say there's a difference between curing somebody and healing somebody. Okay. We're not somebody that comes in and says music's going to take away your illness. That's not what this is about. What this is about is aiding the person's body to be more receptive to whatever the medical treatment is that they're receiving. Okay. If somebody's in the hospital and they're really anxious and the doctor needs to feed that person to be able to calm down, not just because of physical aspects of needing a calm person, but also because of the emotional and spiritual and mental state of that person who's in need of healing. Beaumont, I did my clinical pastoral education at Beaumont. And so I know that they are a hospital that was very receptive to the whole notion of the connection between physical, spiritual, mental, and in the center with all those connecting was the emotional, and how all of those elements of who we are affects all of those other areas of who we are. I've known people who have gotten physical ailments, and in talking with them have discovered that some of that physical ailment may be due to some undesirable thing that they're dealing with in their own life. For instance, I knew somebody that was in human resources, and she literally said it made her stomach ache because human resource for her was more about firing people than helping people improve on the job. And it's just because of the environment that she was in. And she ended up with very serious stomach ailments where they had to do intestinal surgery. So that's just kind of one example about how our mental and spiritual well-being or not well-being can affect the physical. But the same is true reverse. When something happens to our physical body and we begin to grieve whatever it is that we're losing or whatever, it also affects our mental and spiritual being. So what we learn in the MHT program is about 5 different ways of playing, types of playing music types, I should say. One of those is what we call distraction music. So if somebody's in the hospital and they have a broken bone, or maybe they're getting chemotherapy or sitting in a chair receiving dialysis, they're not in any pain, but it's not a fun place to be, right? Would play some what we call distraction music, which could be a familiar tune, an unfamiliar tune. It's just to get their mind off of what's happening to their body at that point, and just being able to place that body somewhere else, their mind somewhere else, so that they can relax more. There are people in ICU. Now, these are folks who's severe trauma, heart attacks, strokes, and a lot of those folks, when you go in the hospital, you see them hooked up to a lot of machines that gives measurements about how their blood pressure is doing, their oxygen levels, and whatnot. And for that, we play a music that is supposed to be very steady, with beats around 50 to 70 beats per minute, because the human heart, the normal heart rate is 60 to 80 beats per minute. And so we want, if somebody's blood pressure is up or their heart is racing, we want their heart rate to entrain to the slow beat that we're putting into the music. The other type of music is high for people who are suffering a lot of pain or are very anxious. For folks like that, we enter into a room and just kind of pay attention to how they're breathing, how is their body reacting, and even maybe their emotional state. And for that group of people, we play what we call relaxation response music. And so that music doesn't have a steady beat. It's something that's, we don't want that person to start concentrating on that. We want them to begin to kind of have their spirit flow. But there will also be spaces of pause in that music. Help them breathe into the flow of the phrases of the music and the silence, so that they begin to kind of breathe and slow down that anxiety. I hope that makes sense. Another kind of medical issue that we would deal with is people with dementia, Alzheimer's, anybody with a cognitive impairment, which also can be strokes. So there we would play familiar music that they might have heard as children, as teenagers, as adults, because scientific evidence has shown that when a familiar tune is taken in to the ears, it begins to affect certain brave patterns of memory, which begins to start firing off in the brain. I don't know the name of it. There's a really great program that PBS did on this research, and Bobby McFerrin was the one who kind of hosted that program. And an example of that was a woman who had been a ballet dancer from a prestigious ballet company. And she had dementia and also was in a wheelchair, but she had been prima donna Swan Lake Swan. And they brought in music. This wasn't live music, but they brought in and played the Swan Lake, that last scene, the dying swan scene. And she's sitting in her chair, and all of a sudden, she's remembering every single hand, because she can't move her legs, but her hands remembered, her arms remembered every single movement that she made in that dance that was so ingrained into her. In her head, she was dancing. And after that was over with, she was able to speak about dancing that. And she hadn't spoken in quite a long time. They talk about using this kind of music to help people begin to walk again. When there's a waltz being played, they start to be able to move their feet. So, and then the last type of music is for people who are actively dying, and that is music that is maybe just the low notes. I would play low notes on my harp, 2 or 3 notes in a row, and then a long space. A couple more, and we're not playing any familiar music because we don't want to take a chance of holding somebody back from moving on to that next stage of their journey, so to speak. However, I will say that all of the teachers and students that are already doing their practicums will talk about having just a deep kind of instinct to play something without being told. They'll like, okay, that urge is just too strong. I'm going to play it. And they'll find out that maybe that was that person's favorite song or something like that. So there is this element of paying attention to the spirit. Okay, it's not a Christian organization, but they're definitely a very spiritual organization that reaches into whatever their higher power is, and we call that God and the Holy Spirit. For now, I think I'm going to take some questions before I kind of give an example of some of the music I play, because I don't want to go on if you still have some questions. Does that make sense? So go ahead and ask some questions.
Hi, Reverend Stacy, it's Lynn. Hi. So I came on a little bit late, but so I know that this is a new venture for you. And are you regularly doing this in hospitals, or where is this taking you right now? How is this path going for you?
Okay. I just finished my last, what they call module. And so I signed all the paperwork saying that I represent MHTP and whatnot. I have a test that I have to take on Saturday. So y'all need to keep me in your prayers because I understand it's not an easy test. There's a lot of material that we covered. And even though it's open book, I think sometimes open book tests are harder than the other stuff. They say it shouldn't take any more than 2 hours. I'm guessing it'll take me 4. Because the other problem is you can't go back and change answers. Once you finish answering this page and move on to the next, you can't go back. So I have to be really careful. I had been trying to call various hospitals, but I think COVID-19, the Delta thing and stuff, so I wasn't getting a hold of anybody. But I think a week ago, on a week from last Monday, I was able to reach somebody at the U of M program because they have a music program as well as a visual arts program. And just from speaking with the guy, he knew exactly what I was talking about. So they obviously have MHTP certified people there. And the person that coordinates their staff, volunteer staff, was on vacation. But he called somebody who lives in Chicago, who is a certified music practitioner, and she coordinates the Beaumont hospitals in the southeast area. So she called me right away and we talked. And so I filled out my volunteer form to begin at Royal Oak Beaumont. And it just takes a few months. They have to do a background check my couple references. Then I have to take the volunteer program. And at that point, then I'll be able to begin playing for patients. We did do my last class. We did, all of us students played for a nursing home over Zoom. So I got to play for 2 patients over Zoom, which was very interesting. I'm hoping that I don't have to do as much Zoom, because I think live, there's a difference between live music and what we listen to on a tape player or a CD or radio. There's definitely these vibrations that come across. And I haven't had anyone play for me, so I don't know, but my sense is the vibrations coming through Zoom, while it might be nice, it's not quite the same. But music is good. I hope that explained it. So yes, Martha.
I might have missed this part, and I know you've explained this to me before, but please reinform me. How is this different from what we have called music therapy?
Okay. So music therapists work alongside the patient to come up with a list of music that they want for themselves, or even engage with an instrument themselves. So they are a participant in their therapy program. Much like going to occupational therapy, and you're engaged in the process of walking or whatever it is that you need to do. So what I do is just come in and play music. I'm kind of like, I call it comfort, just surrounding yourself with a blanket of music that helps you so that you can receive whatever medical help that you're getting, so that your body can receive it better. Does that make sense? Well, does that answer that? Okay.
Would the individual patient or patient's family have to know about you and request that you come in, or would a Beaumont say, hey, this is available to you? Because I don't know that I would have known this was available.
I can't speak for Beaumont, but I can speak for the Ann Arbor Hospital. They have it on their website. I think they have brochures, sitting in the lobby, letting patients know that this is something that is available to them. I suspect that Beaumont probably does the same thing. Nursing staff is very aware that it's there, and so they may be the ones to say, and this happened when I was in pastoral education, if they feel that a patient is anxious and that music might settle them, then they can call us to kind of come in and, can you play some music for this person? Sometimes it is family that might request it, and sometimes family might be in the room at the same time. And so there are times when the patient is not going to be conscious at all. And this is one of the important things is for those of us who are practitioners to do what they call active listening. In other words, we're listening for any moans. We're watching monitors because monitors can give us a sign of something that's going wrong. Twitching of hands or whatever. So we're not just going in and playing, we're trying to be present with the energy of that person in that room, and trying to kind of share energy together so that we can hopefully entrain them to a healthier energy.
I have another question. So is this ever applicable to groups? So for example, you had the healing service, and I was just thinking that, boy, to lower your heart rate, that kind of beat, or let's say there's a community forum where we want to heal something, over issues going on, or a lament or something like that. Does it apply to group settings?
Yeah. Yes. There are some certified practitioners who play for yoga groups. The person that I will be working under, a lot of practitioners now are working really hard because we can't always go in rooms now because of COVID. But the recognition of how stressed staff is. So playing in the hallway, so that staff themselves can kind of settle, or being placed in a room where the staff might gather for a little break and just be playing in there so that they can get a breather with music. So yes. All right, how about I play, I'm gonna play one song, and the first time I play it, it will be what we call the distraction music. So somebody who's non-acute, but it is in the hospital for one reason or another. And then I'm going to play that same piece, but I'm going to play it as if I'm playing for somebody in an ICU setting. And then the third time I play it, I'll play it as if I'm playing for somebody who's very anxious and maybe in a lot of pain. Okay? Let's see how this goes. Forgive my mistakes. The other thing I want to say is one of the things that the program stresses is keep it simple, because too many notes can overload the senses, so to speak. And you really want people to be able to begin to kind of float into the energy of the music that they're receiving, those vibrations of those notes. And we're not performing, we're doing a service. So there's a big difference there. What's great about that is I am not an advanced player. So even people who are not beginners, but beginners moving into that intermediate can even go into this kind of vocation. So my question to you all is, could you see how those different styles of playing the same piece might work for the various medical situations going on? And I'd like to hear from you about how it was to hear this over Zoom. And how did it make you feel? Honesty is the best policy.
I think the last piece you played really helped me understand with those pauses. I mean, that was the playing that affected me the most, because I could see how it gave you time for your own thoughts or your own space where you needed to take whatever was happening with you to a place you needed to go. So I really got the last piece, the way you played the last piece. That made, I thought it was very good, and I can see how that would work in a room with a patient. That's played for a patient who is dying, that piece. Yeah.
After I hear from most of you, I'll play you what I would play for cognitive impairment. It's kind of my favorite go-to piece, because I think a lot of people know it even if they're in their 20s. And then I'll play for you what we would play for somebody actively dying.
I could hear the real differences, and I could, like the first one, I could really feel myself like getting a rhythm, like I imagined that with the heart. So I imagined that, and then I think the first one was distracting. The other one was slowing down to create the heart, and then the third one was the chronic pain. So I could see the breathing. I could feel the breathing that you needed to do in the places that would help with pain. And in terms of how it works over the internet, I'm having some poor, connections. So you never know how people's connections are going to be working. So if everyone was all up to speed and working great, it would sound great. But that's my only watch out on Zoom all the time, is that you never know how people's connections are working.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I mean, that's one of the things that we do go over is the technology of how we need to put our Zoom settings, as well as having a microphone that does a better job of picking sound up than the computer microphone.
I think it kind of hit right
All right.
right to the emotional part of your brain. because you could, at times, it just is so emotional to hear music like that. I mean, parts, like brings tears, like you could just really, I can see how that could really make a difference.
Mhm. Yeah, and the reason that we would not play that for ICU is because the goal there is to make sure it's life-saving technique. We're there to get their heart rate at a good level so that they can heal. I personally find it easier to play the distraction music, and I actually played that a little too fast. I could have played a lot slower. And the relaxation response. It's a little harder to play. And I've pretty much decided if I'm going to play for ICU, I'm probably going to improvise because I still have to find a way to make that music flowing and melodic while still it's doing its work. And I find that works better for me if I'm improvising while keeping that steady beat instead of what's that next note I'm supposed to be playing, kind of thing. So it's all a learning process. So this is what
Can I mention something? The second one, I almost could literally feel my blood pressure going down and my breathing. I felt like my muscles in my neck, my shoulders went down, even for that short period. And I could feel my breathing and just in that short period of time. And it was, I think, the rhythmic, I was unconsciously going with the rhythm. So thank you. I really feel refreshed.
And that's called entrainment. And yeah, most of the patients that we'll be playing for, the normal time that you might be playing is 20 minutes. So
I can see how you would be really ratcheted down in that amount of time.
Right, yeah. All right, you ready for some cognitive impairment music? Whoops. Y'all know what that is, right? Okay. All right. So for those actively dying, be prepared. This is not what you're going to expect. That's what you get for actively dying. And what gets missed in Zoom is there's a point where the vibrations don't get picked up anymore. And actually for actively dying person, I would play that even slower. Oh, excuse me, my antivirus just popped up. Okay. So the point of that is what you miss is just, we try to let that note ring, or the couple notes that we play ring, and don't play the next note until that ringing, that vibration has stopped. I've questioned them. I'm like, wait, how do y'all know? I said, if you play this at my deathbed, I might come awake. I don't know. But they've done the research on it. So I gotta go with the program.
So Stacy, on the dying one, it was not what I expected. It really sounds awful. Now it's like, go away. I don't need to. I wanted to hear. I would imagine I'd want to hear something more uplifting or less. Like I imagine I'm going to be scared, so I don't want to have. That feels like it's scary music, and it doesn't feel like it's soothing. But what is some of the thinking? I know they've got the research, but what is the thinking of the deepness?
One is keeping the low notes, and actually they kind of suggest that we try to stay at the lower end of our register for all of that music, because high notes can kind of cause your brain to start jumping around a little bit. So the low notes are a lot more relaxing. What is the thinking on that? One, we're not trying to hold them back from moving on. So don't make the joke, oh, well, Sarah, you're chasing them away with that kind of music. I think it's about kind of, I imagine like holding them in kind of a cradle of sound that only goes so far. And so that those vibrations just kind of help lift up. I've pretty much decided after I get certified in this, I'll probably go back and get certified to be able to use my voice, because I think for actively dying, I think the voice is a better instrument for something like this. Debbie would have the great voice for this. Just because then it sounds more like a cradling of a lullaby. I've heard some of our students that play the Navajo flute that has those low notes. They're great for this kind of thing because it just feels like a cradle. I'm just not sure that the harp, it's not the sound that I like. So I'll probably go back and get certified in using my voice as an instrument as well.
I was going to ask, what instruments are used for this?
All kinds.
Okay.
All kinds. There's recorders. There's instruments that I've never seen before. Somebody had, it's called a pan drum, which is pretty expensive instrument, but it has these beautiful tones. It's made out of metal, hammered metal, and in a particular scale. The reason I don't have it is because I like to change keys, but the resonance is absolutely gorgeous. There's a guy who plays the harmonica, and I told him he could play at my bedside any old time. It was beautiful. Bassoon, any stringed instruments, voice, a lot of voice and guitar and harp. Well, those are probably the three major ones: voice, harp, and guitar.
Probably not the bagpipes.
The
cymbal.
The trombone.
And I love
Do avoid the higher registers?
Yeah, I was thinking about that when you were talking about the vibrations. I think I'm no physics expert by any means, but higher notes, the vibration is closer together and more jagged, and the lower notes are much smoother and wider waves.
And,
So the
and more
space
pristine.
between the
Mhm.
wave crest and down is
Yeah.
longer and shorter, I'm thinking sometimes. So you're not, it's probably mimicking more maybe what the brain waves are. So the higher waves are asking your brain to, and I think what a vocal tone is not a high violin or a flute. It's more a cello or a
Mhm.
medium harp sound. That
Mhm.
would be a kind of a lower.
Hey, what about a viola, Martha?
A viola, yes, yes,
Yeah.
with Barbara Heath playing it.
There are people who bring their cellos, violas, and people who have played their violin play it at a lower register and very slowly so that it just feels right. Mhm.
Are there any brass instruments that could be used?
I have not heard of a brass instrument yet in the group. Reed instruments, yes, but not the brass.
Do you know when to stop? Do you know how long you should play depending on the situation?
That comes into really paying attention to what's happening with the patient. Now, if it's somebody that is still awake when I'm leaving, then I need to go to another patient. I just, thank them for allowing me to play for them. But some people will kind of just fall asleep. And I'm supposed to continue to play and then quietly get up and leave. Um, people are, that
Stacy,
goes for people's
You're frozen.
Zoom.
you're freezing a little bit. We're just hitting some little bumps of your freezing.
That's
So if you
right.
could just repeat that very last
Okay.
thing, that'd be great.
So the problem with Zoom is I can't see the whole body. I can only see this. And somebody who's in coma is going to be, there's going to be a twitching of a finger if the music isn't up to par and distracting somebody. So um, that's the other disadvantage to playing online.
When you use the voice especially for the actively dying, do you use words or do you just like hum or?
You can use words, but they need to be words. There's a group called Threshold, a national group called Threshold Singers, and they sing for actively dying people as well as others. But their words may be as simple as, we're all walking this road together, and just kind of repeating that, or peace be with you, or you can just hum. It's words can have a tendency to keep people earthbound because it's bringing
Right.
memories. So you want words or just notes that are gonna allow somebody to leave when it's time to leave.
Cool. Okay.
And that's the literature that we have to read for this is very helpful. One of the books that we have to read is called Final Gifts, and it's written by a nurse and a doctor. I can always send out information about who the authors are at some other point to Mary Beth. And there's a lot of conversations they have with people who are dying. And the big question that these people have is, what's the process that my body goes through? And they get told very bluntly, this is how the body begins to shut down. But they begin to relax because now they know, right? It's kind of like when we have an illness and the doctors are still trying to figure it out. And even if we get news that it's a bad illness, there's some kind of relief because we finally know what we're dealing with and what the next process is. So it appears that dying is that same thing. But the other thing is the sacredness of the space of dying, and how we honor that and help families. A great book called Final Gifts. All the reading that we did, except for maybe a book called, oh boy, sounds something, but it was more on the science of vibrations. Martha, you could have written the book. But a lot of, research material and scientific anecdotal stuff on the science of sounds and how it affects the energies all around us. But all the other books really had a spiritual component to them.
So you're going to give Mary Beth a list so we could get a list?
I can do that, yeah.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Other questions? Let me stop the recording then.